Organizing this meeting, nothing to do with the agenda, and I was not informed until 48 hours before this meeting, so I'm not calling this meeting to order at this point in time.
As Vice President, are you going to call the meeting?
Yes, I will call the meeting to order.
Thank you.
Roll call.
Mrs. Gleason?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mrs. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Campworth here. Mrs. Ressler?
Here.
Ms. Stearns?
Here.
Mr. Cannon?
Here.
Pledge, please.
The United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Motion to appoint President pro tempore.
I'll make a motion to appoint Ms. Russell President pro tem.
A second.
A motion made by Mrs. Stearns, seconded by Mrs. Gleason. Roll call, please.
Ms. Stearns?
Yes.
Ms. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones? Mrs. Campworth, no. Mrs. Ressler?
Aye.
Mr. Cannon?
No.
Motion passed.
Yes.
Hearings on charges against President Larry Canning.
Ms. Ressler, I have been asked by Ms. Stearns to conduct a hearing on the charges against Mr. Cannon. With your permission, we have...
Excuse me, Mr. Hauser, are you being paid by the district for this, or is it out of personal pocket?
I am one of the board attorneys for the school board. I've been asked by 4 members of the board to be here. I will be paid by the board.
So have you been officially sworn in, or has there been an official vote for your services to District 228?
I have been an attorney for the district for the last 11 years. There's
Yeah.
never been a vote to remove me as attorney for the district.
Well, right
And I
now,
continue to represent the district on several matters.
Mr. Hauser, I don't want to argue with you, and I think that you did a pretty good job for us while we were here, okay? But there's other circumstances why your firm was removed.
We were never removed.
John Murphy is our attorney, okay? So that's fine, you can go ahead, but I will, this is under protest
Okay.
that you're here, okay? Just to set for the record, Ms. DeVos.
And Ms. Stearns, just for the record, you represent 4 board members who called this board meeting. Are you asking that I act as representative for the Board of Education here?
I am.
Is there any objection from anyone else but Mr. Cannon?
I object as well.
And as I was saying, we have a court reporter here taking down what everybody says, just in case this does go any further than this evening.
Sure.
Okay, so with that said, I'd like to proceed with the hearing. And I'm going to ask the court reporter if she would please swear in all of the board members, Ms. DeVos and Dr. Kendall as potential witnesses. Thank you. And the first thing I would ask, has everyone received a copy of the concerns that Mrs. Stearns has stipulated? Yes, everyone has received it. All right. I would ask the court reporter to mark the concerns as Exhibit A. I do. I was going to come to you.
Oh, okay.
And the first person I would like to ask questions of is Dr. Kendall. Dr. Kendall, would you state your name, spell your last name for the court reporter?
Dr. William Kendall, Kendall.
Dr. Kendall, you're superintendent of the school district, is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you describe for us briefly what your duties are as superintendent?
As superintendent, I'm responsible for the day-to-day operation, setting programs to advance the district in academics, fiscal responsibility, as well as community relations. We have 4 high schools, about 500 staff members, about 5,200 students, and a budget close to $91 million.
Are you answering questions here tonight voluntarily?
No,
Why are you here?
I'm here because board members asked me to be here, told me to be here.
Okay. And you intend to tell the truth?
I do.
So let's begin. I'm going to the list of concerns that Mrs. Stearns has circulated. Now, the first one refers to a conversation that she alleges Mr. Canning had with you regarding your employment contract. Did Mr. Canning have a conversation with you regarding your employment contract?
Yes.
Do you recall when that conversation took place?
April 29th of 2015.
2015?
Yes.
April 29th, that was after the election, is that right? That was also after the organizational meeting when Mr. Canning was appointed Vice President of Board of Education, is that right?
Yes.
Where did this conversation take place?
In my office.
Who was present for the conversation?
Mr. Canning and myself.
I'm going to ask you to the best of your recollection, can you tell us what was said by the committee and what was said by you?
Mr. Canning asked me to tear up my contract.
Your extended contract.
And did he say anything else with regard to it?
Yeah, he felt it was political and he felt it was inappropriate. And he said if I tore up the contract, he would make it worth my while.
And what did you take that to mean?
I took it to mean that he didn't believe that the contract was appropriate and that he answered to him.
What was your response to that?
I said I was very happy with my contract and I wouldn't know what making it worth my while would mean.
Did Mr. Cannon explain to you what make it worth your while would mean?
No.
Did Mr. Cannon vote for your extended contract when it came before the Board of Education?
Yes.
When was that?
I believe November.
Did Mr. Cannon also send an email supporting your extended contract?
He sent an email to Mr. Kirkman and copied me on it.
And have you seen that email?
Yes.
I'm going to ask the court reporter to mark this as Exhibit B. Ask you to recognize that document.
Yes.
And what is that?
An email to Mr. Kirkman from Mr. Canning.
Can you read it to us, please?
Hi, John. After further research and thought, I would not have any problem supporting a motion to extend Bill's contract. Bill is in it for the kids. What more could a board member ask for? Thanks, Larry Canning.
Thank you. Mrs. Stearns, were you aware that Mr. Canning was going to ask Dr. Kendall to tear up his contract?
No, I was not.
Were you aware of Mr. Canning telling Dr. Kendall that it would make it worth his while to tear up his contract?
No, I was not.
Mrs. Gleason, were you aware that Mr. Canning was going to approach Dr. Kendall and ask him to tear up his contract?
No.
Were you aware that he was going to tell Dr. Kendall he would make it worth his while to do so?
No.
Mrs. Jones, were you aware that Mr. Canning was going to approach Dr. Kendall and ask him to tear up his contract?
No.
Were you aware that he was going to tell Dr. Kendall he would make it worth his while?
No.
Ms. Ressler, were you aware that Mr. Canning was going to approach Dr. Kendall and ask him to tear up his contract?
No.
Were you aware that Mr. Canning would tell him he would make it worth his while?
No.
Ms. Camworth, were you aware that Mr. Canning was going to approach Dr. Kendall and ask him to tear up his contract?
No.
Were you aware that he was going to tell Dr. Kendall that he would make it worth his while? And Mr. Johnson, were you aware that Mr. Canning was going to approach Dr. Kendall and ask him to tear up his contract?
No.
Were you aware that he was going to tell Dr. Kendall he would make it worth his while?
No.
Mrs. Stearns, did the Board of Education ever authorize Mr. Canning to do this?
No.
Was any action ever taken in a board meeting authorizing Mr. Canning to do this?
No.
So basically, Mr. Canning was doing this on his own, is that
Yes.
correct?
I would like to have a chance to respond to that.
I was going to give you a chance at the end of all of them, if you'd like to respond.
Each one as you go,
That's fine.
absolutely. And I have a brief opening statement that I'd like to read into record, Mr. Voss, or reporter. I believe this meeting tonight is a result of my efforts and actions over the past 2.5 years to break up a good old boys network that exists in our district between certain entrenched board members and administration. My effort will continue, regardless if I have a title in front of my name or not, to weed out board members and district staff who want to continue with business as usual and who want to grant themselves hefty salaries, gracious benefits, and bonuses for producing very little or no results for the taxpayers and students. I will read my responses to these trumped-up charges and will not entertain any questions afterwards. My written answers will be sufficient, as this is not a legal trial and I have done nothing wrong. I will, however, answer any questions regarding student achievement and fiscal responsibility, as I believe these are more important issues facing our district than the political power struggle that brought us here tonight. My response to the first allegation, or whatever you would like to call it. On April 15th, so I believe your date is inaccurate, Dr. Kendall. On April 15th, before I was sworn in as president, I met with Dr. Kendall, as any board member is allowed to do without full board approval. During this meeting, we discussed many topics. Never did I threaten employment of Dr. Kendall. I asked Dr. Kendall to voluntarily give back the 5-year contract extension given to him by the previous board in November, as I felt it was politically motivated and not earned. I said he did not have to give his answer today, but I did express my wishes that he voluntarily give it back, as he stated to me that this extension came to him out of the blue, and this was not typical this early in his current contract to have an extension. We have not talked about that since that meeting, April 15th. I need explanation on make it worth my while, as this is the first time I have heard this. And that is my response to that first charge.
Dr. Kendall, what day did you believe this meeting took place?
April 29th.
And how do you know it took place on April 29th?
I took notes.
You have those notes?
Yes.
I also, before the meeting, Mark Johnson was part of this meeting to discuss athletic matters. After he had concluded with his matters, I stayed after Dr. Kendall's office, and that's when this meeting took place, and that was right after the election, and that was the 15th of April. And I will have to research my notes so I can show proof of that as well, Mr. Hauser.
Dr. Kendall, the second concern is that Mr. Canning met with you and threatened the employment of the principals of Bremen High School and Hillcrest High School. Can you tell us who the principals are at Bremen High School and Hillcrest High School?
Dr. Dave Travilkus at Bremen High School and Ms. Renee Sims at Hillcrest High School.
Did you have a meeting with Mr. Canning with regard to the principals at Hillcrest and Bremen?
Yes,
What day did that meeting occur?
that was the same meeting on the 29th of April.
And how do you know it was the 29th of April?
It was in my notes.
Can I say something?
Yes.
The meeting was April 29th. That I met with Dr. Kendall and Larry invited this up for me. And I discussed several issues there. One thing was the topic of my son's grade. And I left and Larry Canning stayed behind and spoke further with him after my meeting. So it was April 29th.
Thank you. So it's meeting on April 29th when you and Mr. Canning discussed the
Alleged.
principals.
April 29th.
It's meeting on April 29th when you and Mr. Canning discussed the principals. Was there anyone else present at that meeting?
No, it was just Mr. Cannon and myself
And where did that meeting take place?
in my office.
To the best of your recollection, can you tell us what was said by Mr. Canning and what was said by you with regard to the principals?
Yes, Mr. Canning stated that there needed to be top-level change in both Bremen and Hillcrest.
Did he say anything else with regard to that?
No,
And what did you interpret that to mean?
that he expected me to change the principals at Hillcrest and Bremen,
Who is at the top level at the high schools?
the principal.
So you interpreted that to mean that Mr. Canning was asking you to change the principals at the high schools.
Yes,
Did he indicate any reason why?
we had a discussion about performance of both Dr. Travilkus and Ms. Sims.
And did you agree with his assessment of the performance of principals?
I agreed that there were some issues that we discussed that I agreed with, but I did not agree with the assessment that they need to be changed.
You didn't agree that they ought to be removed as principals?
No.
Mrs. Stearns, were you aware that Mr. Canning was going to meet with Dr. Kendall to discuss the continued employment of principals at Bremen and Hillcrest?
No, I was not.
Mr. Johnson, were you aware that Mr. Canning was going to meet with Dr. Kendall to discuss the continued employment of principals at Bremen and Hillcrest?
Oh,
Ms. Camworth, were you aware that Mr. Canning was going to meet with Dr. Kendall to discuss the principals at Bremen and Hillcrest?
No.
Ms. Ressler, were you aware that Mr. Canning was going to meet with Dr. Kendall to discuss the continued employment of the principals at Bremen and Hillcrest High Schools? Mrs. Jones, were you aware that Mr. Canning was going to meet with Dr. Kendall to discuss the continued employment of the principals at Bremen and Hillcrest High Schools?
No.
Mrs. Gleason, were you aware that Mr. Canning was going to meet with Dr. Kendall to discuss the continued employment of the principals at Hillcrest High School and Bremen High School?
No, I was not.
Mrs. Stearns, was that ever a topic of conversation in any board meeting?
It was not.
Mrs. Stearns, are you on the personnel committee for the school district?
I am now.
Mrs. Gleason, are you on the personnel committee for the school district?
I was the chairperson prior to the organization. I am not on the committee now.
Okay. May I ask who's on that committee right now? Mrs. Russell, was the discussion regarding the continued employment of the principals at Bremen and Hillcrest, was that ever a topic of conversation in the personnel committee?
Not that I recall, no.
And I am also on the personnel committee, Mr. Hauser.
Mr. Johnson.
Mrs. Gleason?
The meeting took place April 29th. The committee assignments had not even been made, so discussion would have had been previous to that, and I did chair the last personnel meeting the week before the organization.
And was there any discussion of the continued employment of the principals at Bremen or Hillcrest High School at the last meeting?
There was none.
The Board of Education, Mrs. Stearns, ever take action to approve the discussion of the continued employment of principals at Hillcrest and Bremen?
We did not.
Mr. King, would you like to respond?
Sure. Again, I'll revert back. I met with Dr. Kendall, as any board member is allowed to do without full board approval. And the second charge, Bremen High School, I would like to add, a item to this, and I would like to pass it out to the full board, and I would like it in public record.
Would you like to mark it as an exhibit? I think we're up to exhibit C.
Well, it's number 2 on the issues list.
Do you mind if we call it exhibit C?
I would like to keep it as 2 on the
Well, you
issues
can
list.
use the number 2.
Yeah, sure. You can mark it as you will, as you'd like. And I'd like to give each board member. And I have others for each one of the issues that I'd like to pass on.
Do you have an additional copy that I may have?
And I would like, yes, sure. And I would like Secretary Camworth to read this into the public record, if she would. You should.
Let the record show that Mr. Canning has distributed a document that has number 2 at the top that we're going to label it exhibit C. And then Mrs. Camworth is going to read the document.
After I get done reading my response to issue number 2. Number 2, Bremen High School and Hillcrest High School are the lowest performing schools in our district for several years in a row in student achievement. I never threatened the employment of the principals. I voiced my opinion as a board member and taxpayer about the need for leadership changes at these buildings. I also asked Dr. Kendall if the schools and their principals were receiving all the necessary tools they needed in order to succeed. Mrs. Camworth, could you please read, I'll call it Exhibit 2 or issue number 2. This letter came to me from a substitute teacher. He used to be a full-time teacher, discussing some of the issues and concerns he had at our Hillcrest High School. Could you please read that into the record, Mrs. Camworth?
Yes. Dear Larry, what has happened to our school? It was once the best school to be at in the district. When you were here, we had the best staff, best students, and a wonderful relationship with our supporting staff. It was my home away from home. I did not mind the long hours with coaching and supervising activities. I recently have taken on maternity leave at Hillcrest. It is definitely not the place I remember. The morale among the staff is the lowest that I've ever seen in the district. The staff at Hillcrest is comprised of really excellent teachers, and that is the only reason that the school has not completely fallen apart. Many of the teachers would like to write the letter you are reading now, but know that there would be negative repercussions if they say anything. The students are disrespectful, and why shouldn't they be? There are no consequences. Things that go on at Hillcrest would not be tolerated at the other schools. I had a girl get into a fight in class, have to be escorted out, and 10 minutes later she was back in class. She got into another fight thereafter. At Oak Forest, Tinley Park, or Bremen, she would have been suspended. Why are there different rules for different buildings? Or better yet, the same rules for Oak Forest, Tinley Park, and Bremen, and different rules for Hillcrest. I have a girl with 21 absences this semester, and I'm being asked to change the grades of the teacher I am subbing for to help her pass the course. This to me is unprofessional. Does this happen at the other 3 schools? Students are allowed to have cell phones, iPods, and next year they are getting tablets. No one should have them. Hillcrest High School scores are on the watch list. The students do not, on their own accord, learn enough in class to do well on the standardized test. A huge disservice is happening for the student that wants to learn and become successful. My heart goes out to them. They should be able to transfer out. How can they learn with garbage cans being set on fire in the classroom, a girl beaten up in the hall, and a sink ripped off the wall in the PE locker room? And in 2 other fights, and that was Tuesday, one day at Hillcrest High School. I don't blame the teachers at all. The environment that the students are presented with is not one that is conducive to learning, definitely not one that a teacher can teach in. I know that we can ultimately blame school leaders for what goes wrong, but I can't completely blame the Hillcrest administration. They are trying to do the best with what they are told. From what I understand, the problem is that the orders come from outside this building, and the Hillcrest administrators' hands are tied to make changes. An example is that the state and district administration are telling only Hillcrest not to suspend so many students. Suspending students is necessary as a consequence when the student's actions warrants it. As the new board president, maybe you should do something different. Get on the substitute list and sub for one of the freshman teachers. Don't tell any of the students who you are and experience firsthand what life is like for these educators at Hillcrest. It might explain why so many of them use all of their sick days. I'm very proud of your accomplishments and prouder yet the man you have become. You were given every opportunity when you were here at Hillcrest. It is time to think of the students at Hillcrest that want those same opportunities so they can become a success in the game of life. You are my friend, so I thought you should have a heads up. Let this letter state between coach and player what has happened to our school. Love ya, Coach Stewart.
Thank you, Ms. Campworth. I have gotten several, let me backtrack on that. Several people within the school have also reached out to me. They have not put it as bluntly as Coach Stewart, Ron Stewart, has put it in his letter. I am an elected official. I have every right to meet with any administrator, especially as the board president, and discuss these issues. I did that with Dr. Kendall on April 15th, and I was not the president at that time. I'm done with issue number 2.
Mr. Cannon, just so just so the record is relatively complete here, I don't see a date on this.
I have the official letter with a date stamp. This letter was opened, this letter was addressed to me, Larry Canning, and sent to the administration office, okay? This letter was opened without my permission, okay? And it was stamped. I don't know who stamped it, okay? And it is stamped May 21st, 2015, 228 Ad Center, received, okay? It was not my permission. It was seen by the administration before I had a chance to review it and dive into it.
Thank you. Mr.
Dr. Kendall, did I contact you about a teacher from Hillcrest with their concerns about a recent sub at Hillcrest that, in the teacher's opinion, for 4 days had party day, and then when he decided to start teaching, the kids rebelled?
Yes.
Were there actually, when was the sink ripped off the wall?
I talked to the Hillcrest administration, and they did not remember a sink being ripped off the wall this year. They did remember somebody sitting on a sink about 3 years ago. The sink fell off the wall and it was repaired.
And as far as the staff at Hillcrest being directed not to suspend students, who directed that?
Mr. Goggins and myself have worked very hard to reduce suspension for things that we felt were not appropriate for suspension. So we've worked on that for about 4 or 5 years now, and you need to keep your students in class in order to help them learn. So we've reduced suspensions over the last 5 years.
Was this teacher asked to change grades or input grades of makeup work?
There was a young lady who had some absences and was struggling with some issues, and the teacher who went out on maternity leave was working with the student to try to get her back on track and pass the class. So one of the administrators asked Mr. Stewart to continue the process of helping the girl with her assignments and she worked her way back to school.
Is it not illegal for us not to let a student make up assignments? For absences?
It's against school code. Inappropriate.
How many, when we're talking about fights, are we talking about physical fights this girl was in?
She had an argument in a class. She went to the dean's office. The deans were working with her. They knew some of her other issues. Thought that she was calmed down, thought that she was okay to go back to class, sent her back to class and she had another outburst.
So there was only 2, not 3.
Do we know that for a
I-
fact, that there was only 2?
That the school's aware of?
Do we have paperwork showing that?
We have nothing to show otherwise.
Do we have paperwork here on it? That there was only 2 fights, not 3?
No.
We don't have anything.
I brought her a response. I didn't bring the response that I gave her.
I have very many questions regarding this. Is there any other answers that the questions that I asked you that you would call this afternoon?
It was quite lengthy. No, I don't. Can I add one additional thing, Mr. Hauser?
Yes.
Mr. Canning stated that he had a conversation with me asking what the principals need in order to be supported and do well. That was at a different meeting. That was not at this meeting on.
That's correct. That's correct.
Do you recall the date of that additional meeting?
It could be in my records. I would have to look for that. But Dr. Kendall's correct. That statement was made at a separate meeting other than the one at April 15th.
I think it was June 4th.
Mr. Honda?
Yes.
I'd like to say that I've been asking for this letter. I asked for it last month because Mr. Canning was making statements about disciplining people for opening his mail, and I pointed out that board policy says that anything that's sent to the district is the matter for the entire board. He refused to divulge this letter or the name of the person who sent it, and we got a lengthy response from Dr. Kendall about each of the accusations in here, and I find it interesting that suddenly we can have the letter.
I'll respond to that.
I don't need a
Mrs. Gleason.
response, thank you.
I would like to respond for the record. This letter came to me, again, it was opened without my permission. Other people seen it before I had a chance to read it. With respect to principals and administration at Hillcrest, I deemed it necessary to give it to the administration so they could check into these allegations and prepare a response. Dr. Kendall did prepare a response off of these allegations.
That we received on June 25th.
And Mrs. Gleason, because you referred to it, I'm referring to Board Policy 2:140, and it says, there is no expectation of privacy for any communication sent to the board or its members, whether sent by letter, email, or other means. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, it is.
There cannot be a mad dash to the mailbox to open board mail before they get a chance to read it. It's very inappropriate, and as long as I'm on this board, administration does not have permission to open my mail. I will share mail with the administration and with the district if the concerns are warranted, as these are very warranted. I would have appreciated to be notified of this first.
But you wouldn't share them with other board members. That's my objection.
Excuse me, you have it in your hand. You're upset about the time frame it took for that. I can appreciate that. But instead of throwing people under the bus, we need to go ahead and check this stuff out. I gave it to Dr. Kendall, and I expressed to him that until I got the approval of the author of this letter, that their name was not to be exposed to anybody.
But that violates the policy. There's no expectation of privacy. That's our policy.
All right, with regard to number 2, is there anything else anyone would like to say? Let's move on to number
Can I
3.
speak to number
He did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have one additional thing to say.
I kind of take exception to the mad dash to the mailbox, the open mail. Mr. Voss has been the board secretary, superintendent secretary for quite some time, and she was following a procedure that was in place for many, many years. So it was not something that she was excited to get or was looking for. She just followed the procedures that we've had in place for many years.
How long have you been superintendent, Dr. Kendall?
I just completed my 8th year.
You're talking about a procedure that's put in place. How many board presidents have you served under as superintendent?
3.
Can you tell me who they were?
Debbie Stearns, John Kirkton, and Mr. Kennedy.
This procedure you referred to of opening the mail for board members that comes to the school district, has that been in place under all those prior presidents?
Yes.
Has there ever been any direction from any other president or board member not to open the mail that comes in their name to the school district? You have to answer the court report.
No, I'm sorry. Shake me.
Mr. Kennedy, you said you wanted to say something?
Yes, I have a few points here. In regards to the opening of mail, I had inquired about, again, let me back up. Mr. Voss had told me that if it looks important, that is how it was determined that they would open the mail. We get different pamphlets, different literatures, and I would guess that has never been open for me. It's always been in my board packet at the board meeting, okay? So I don't know what the criteria is for important. I had received a letter from Governor Rauner that was in my board packet unopened. And it was not a form letter, it was a personal letter from Mr. Rauner. That was not open. This letter came addressed to me with a Hillcrest letterhead on it. As you can see, Larry Canning Ad Center, okay? So this evidently over the governor's letter was deemed more important, okay? And I understand what Mrs. DeVos says. We are all within a proximity of the administration office, and if this letter looks important, I think we should receive a phone call, and as I stated, we're all very close to the Ad Center, we can come pick it up. So I'm confused with that policy in terms of what mail looks important and what mail does not. And I have stated that to the administration, my confusion on that issue.
Any other comments with regard to charge or concern number 2?
Can I add Mr. Canning's email about opening mail? Which states that there will be severe consequences if this directive is not followed, even though this is a violation of board policy.
Well, let's go back. Are you referring to something that Mr. Canning wrote?
I have a letter from, yes, this is his email to Dr. Kendall,
What's the date of the letter?
May 31st,
It is from Mr. Canning.
to Dr. Kendall.
What does it say with regard to opening mail?
I'm very concerned and distressed about the situation that occurred regarding the opening of my personal mail on May 21st, 2015 at the Administration Center. This letter was addressed to me and should have only been opened by me. I am asking that you put out a directive to all administrative staff that for no reason should anyone's mail be opened unless it is addressed to them. It should include that severe consequences will follow if this directive is not followed. If board members receive mail, they should be notified and given the option to pick up their mail or wait until the next board function to receive it. I would appreciate you forwarding this message to the rest of the board.
And Mrs. Gleason, has the Board of Education ever authorized severe consequences for opening mail?
Obviously not, since our board policy states that there is no expectation of privacy for any communication sent to the board or its members, whether by letter, email, or other means.
So the threat of severe consequences is something that Mr. Canning threatened on his own.
I would presume that from the letter, yes, his letter.
I stand 100% by that email.
By the email referring to severe consequences?
Correct. And I directed Dr. Kendall to send that to the board members so they were aware of that.
And what severe consequences did you think you could impose?
I had no severe consequences in mind at that time, but I would think opening someone's personal mail I totally agree with, if it's district business, it definitely belongs going to an open forum and the board members to be able to see what's in there. But I do believe that the board member should have the first option of opening that mail before anybody else, before the administration opens it. I want to make myself very clear on that.
Do you believe that you as an individual board member, even as president of the Board of Education, has the authority to impose severe consequences against any employee of the district?
Absolutely not. I believe that it needs to be consulted with the entire Board of Education. If that letter came out and there was some haste in there as far as severe consequences, so be it. I was very upset having my personal mail open. As you can see in the last line of Mr. Stewart's letter, let this letter stay between coach and player. What happened to our school? I at least should have been given the opportunity to open that letter first. I'm not in opposition of sharing it with the board.
Okay, let's move on to
Can
the
I
third.
ask one question?
Certainly.
How does a substitute teacher have school district letterhead? I would think of a letter paid from one of the schools that would keep someone's interest open.
I assume you're just asking that. I have no answer to
I
that.
just think it's kind of strange that the letter should come in a school district letterhead.
This guy coached with you, or he coached you before? Ron Stewart? Coach Stewart.
Ron Stewart was I believe, 30-year employee of Hillcrest High School.
Correct.
Coach Stewart, I graduated in 1985 from Hillcrest High School.
So you probably
Coach
coached
Stewart
him, right?
was one of my teachers and coaches at Hillcrest High School back.
So
in
you
the
should have been able to look up your address, personal address, and send that letter to the address rather than to the.
I don't have any explanation or reason why Mr. Stewart would send it to the ad center,
Then you
other
should
than
probably
I
have
had
him
the board.
explain himself why he didn't do that, so it wouldn't upset anybody. But none of us,
I agree. I would rather have it come to my house.
that's what should happen. Probably you should be taking
But
that comment.
I had no idea there was a letter coming, and I would not like to debate this issue with
I
you.
understand.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, the third concern is that Mr. Canny ordered Tinley Park High School to provide seats up front for Mr. Canny and member campers' families at graduation. I'd like to ask questions of Mr. Voss. Mr. Voss, can you tell us, you're an employee of the school district?
I am.
What is your position?
I'm the board recording secretary, so I'm the secretary of communications.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
I'm sorry. Board recording secretary, superintendent secretary, community relations coordinator.
How long have you held that position?
With this position since about 1993.
So, my math, that's about, what, 22 years?
Yes, yes.
Mr. Voss, did you have any communication with Mr. Canning regarding seats at graduation at Tinley Park High School?
I did.
Do you recall when that occurred?
April 14th, I believe.
That was subsequent, that was after the election, is that right?
Yes,
That was before the organization meeting, however, is that correct?
that's correct.
How did this conversation occur? Was it face-to-face or was it telephone?
It was a phone call. I think it was started with a text message to call, and then I called and we had a conversation.
So you actually initiated a phone call with Mr. Canning?
Yes,
Where were you when you initiated that telephone conversation?
in my office.
Was there anyone else present?
No,
To your knowledge, was there anyone else on the telephone during that conversation?
I don't believe so, no.
Can you tell us the rest of your recollection? What was said to Mr. Canning? What was said to him?
Mr. Canning asked if it was possible to get seating at the board, or excuse me, at the graduation ceremony for Tinley Park High School for the Canning family and for the Campworth family. They have graduates, and I believe the Canning family needed 6 seats and the Campworth family needed 12.
Did he indicate to you where he would like that seating to be?
He requested it to be at the front.
What did you do in response to that?
I told them I would have to talk to the administration at Tinley Park High School.
And did you talk to the administration?
I did. I talked to Randy Cowanhoven. He's the associate.
I talked to Randy.
Randy Cowanhoven.
Spell Cowanhoven?
I can. Couwenhoven. He's associate principal.
All right, so you've been in this position since 1993. During that period of time, have you ever had any other board member seek to get special seating at a graduation?
No, I haven't.
Dr. Kendall?
I would,
Excuse me, but let me finish my
special
question.
seating, you'd have to define special seating.
Well, you have to be up front according to Mr. Moss. Dr. Kendall, were you present at the graduation ceremony at Tinley Park High School?
Yes.
Did you witness where the Canning family and the Campbell family sat at that graduation ceremony?
Yes, the stage was set, so they were to the right of the stage, second and third row, and the band was right in front of them.
Was that seating reserved for the Canning family and Campbell family?
Yes.
How do you know that?
There were signs that said reserved. Reserved for the Canning family, reserved for the Campbell family.
And where was that seating in relationship to the band?
It was right in front of the band.
Does Mr. Canning have any family members in the Tinley Park High School band?
Yes, I believe it is too.
Was one of them graduating?
Yes.
How about Ms. Campworth? Does she have any family members in the Tinley Park band?
Yes, she has one that graduated.
They graduated on that day?
Correct.
Would you consider that to be special seating for board members and their family? They have it reserved?
Yes.
Since you've been superintendent of the school district, have you ever had another board member request that type of special seating?
No.
Have you been to all the graduations at all four high schools since you've been superintendent?
Yes.
Have you ever seen seats reserved for board members?
No.
So you've never seen cards saying reserved for example, the Canning family?
No.
That's never occurred before?
No.
I'd like to respond.
One moment. Go ahead.
Ms. DeVos, I'd like to ask you a question. Do you remember in our phone conversation, I believe it was at the very beginning, that I stated to you that under no circumstances did I want special treatment? How many times did I say that?
One that I remember.
Okay. I said it several, but one is fine. I'll read my statement on issue number 3. I called Lori DeVos to inquire about the procedure regarding seating arrangements at graduation. Having never had a child graduate before, I wasn't sure what the procedure was for obtaining seats. Lori said that she believed that Randy Cowanhoven was the person in charge of setting up commencement ceremony. She said she would contact him. I made it clear to Lori that under no circumstance was I asking for special treatment. I later received an email from Randy that he had said he had reserved 10 seats for my family. As board members, we have all been provided a variety of privileges through the district, such as special parking passes and extracurricular activity passes. That's my response for number 3.
I'd like to respond as well, given that my name was mentioned, that I have 2 children that one was in the band and one that graduated that was a band member. As a new board member at the time, I was not aware that there was a procedure, not a procedure, a policy about graduation seats. I was informed that there was going to be reserve seating for my family. I was informed that there would be 12 seats. I stated I did not need 12. I did not want to take up space that wasn't necessary. I asked that if I could have 6 tickets that my student was allowed. I think it turned out to be 7. I was told by Mr. Cowhaven and Tally that I would have reserved seating in the front. I did not ask for this. I did not ask Mr. Canning to ask for this on my behalf, nor was I aware that Mr. Canning was asking for any seats. We did not ask for any seats. As a board member, I don't think it's ridiculous that their family can sit in the front. We're board members, we serve the district. Our family should be close by us when we're participating in commencement ceremonies. So I don't even understand this allegation against Mr. Canning, and that's my response.
Mr. Voss, did you feel that having had this request from the board president, you had any other action to take other than calling the school district to arrange for seating for Mr. Canning and Ms. Hinkler?
No,
Why was that?
because when a board member calls, I try to help them to the best of my ability.
Could you speak up, Lori? It's getting kind of hard for us to hear.
I said when a board member calls me, a board member, I'll try to do my best to help them, or help them to the best of my ability, or to get an answer to the question.
In your opinion, was I looking for special treatment?
I think you needed an answer to that question, and I didn't get it.
Thank you. Thank you for being honest.
I'd also like to add, too, that I would expect that any board member that had a student graduating, they have the capability to have their family sitting next to them. I would expect that for any seated board member.
And I'd like to point out that as a seated board member that had 2 children graduate, one on the night that my father-in-law was dying in hospice, and the other where my son actually sang the national anthem, my families didn't get any special seating or reserved seating in the gymnasium at Bremen.
Mrs. Bessler, you raised your hand.
I did, yes. I guess I was confused by this allegation in the beginning because I was approached by Mrs. Stearns in the bathroom prior to the Summer Park graduation, and I was asked if I had any family members graduating because there was reserved seating for board members up front.
That's not correct.
I did
That's
not
a lie.
have any family members sitting up front, so I thanked her for the offer and didn't think anything of it.
Mrs. Stearns, you were responding?
That's not it. That's not true at all.
You didn't talk to me in the bathroom?
I did not tell you that I could get you seats up front.
No, I didn't say you can
No,
get
no.
them. You told me that there
No,
were.
I asked you if you had anyone graduating. And as a board member, I think we're privileged already to be participating in their commencement. I don't think we should be expected to take front row seat.
Would you say something, please? Mrs. Stearns, have you ever taken advantage of the activity passes that get us into the different events?
I have.
Have you ever taken advantage of the parking passes?
At graduation, yes.
And not at any other time?
No.
But you do agree that these are privileges above and beyond the normal
No.
taxpayer?
No, I do not agree.
Okay.
The activities passes are, as a board member, we're expected to be available to the community. Our way of doing that is attending events at all the schools. And to make that easier for us, we're giving passes to them, as are board members from each of our feeder districts.
I'd just like to ask Mrs. DeVos a question. My seat was separated at the Bremen graduation. Could you tell me how that came about?
I don't know.
I can tell you.
Yes.
Mrs. Stearns came to me and asked me where you should be placed because of some things accusations that you had made, and the board members weren't feeling comfortable with having you sit by them at that particular time.
That's not accurate either. I had said Evelyn's seat is separated because Evelyn is fearful, and then you still can switch them.
Evelyn is fearful of
Mr. Johnson.
By
We'll
your
get to
fault.
that one.
So you did it
Mr. Johnson, what did you just say,
by his doing, is that correct?
Fault.
You did that?
That's
Just
my
can't-
fault.
No. Did you order the separation? Who actually did it?
Mrs. Stearns came up and said she was asking if you could be removed to the other side of the stage because people did not feel comfortable, and I assume people, meaning Ms. Gleason, did not feel comfortable sitting next to you because of the allegations that you had made that prior week leading up to commencement.
So who
And
did it?
and that charge is on here, and I will discuss it further when we come to it.
Did you have some paperwork to pass on to us? That will step through?
I will when it comes up to the specific issue. Yes, you'll have that.
Okay, the fourth concern has to do with the appointment of a second law firm for the Board of Education. Ms. Stearns, what board meeting did that take place at?
At the reorganization meeting,
What was the date of the
I think it was
reorganization?
April 29th.
28.
Can you tell us what occurred at that board meeting with regard to the law firm?
The existing board had questions as to how this legal firm was chosen, and we were told Mr. Canning had saw a video of the law firm and made his decision based on that. We had requested that we table for further discussion, and were rejected.
Can you clarify, Mrs. Stearns, who we are?
The existing board members outside of the new board
Can you
members.
state their name?
I believe Mrs. Gleason, Mrs. Jones, and myself.
Thank you.
Mrs. Stearns, was there any conversation with the Board of Education prior to that board meeting regarding attorneys?
No,
Did Mr. Canning seek approval from any board members regarding new attorneys prior to that board meeting?
no,
Were any interviews conducted with the new attorneys prior to that board meeting?
no, not that I was part of.
Did you have an opportunity to meet the new attorneys prior to that board meeting?
No,
Mrs. Gleason, were you informed that Mr. Canning was going to add additional attorneys prior to that board meeting?
I found out when the agenda was posted for the reorganization meeting.
Did you have the opportunity to meet the new attorneys prior to that board meeting?
I did not.
Did you have the opportunity to interview the
I
new
did not.
attorneys prior to that board meeting?
I did not.
How long have you been on the board, Mrs. Gleason?
22 years.
During that period of time, there has been a change in attorneys on two occasions that I'm aware of, is that correct?
That is correct.
In each of those occasions, was there not an RFP that went out, a request for proposals to attorneys prior to the change in attorneys?
One time there was, one of the other times that I can recall, it was not.
Was there an interview of attorneys prior to changing attorneys?
The one time there was, the second time there was not.
And Mrs. Jones, did you have questions of Mr. Canning at that board meeting regarding the change in attorneys?
Yes, I did.
Did Mr. Canning satisfactorily answer your questions regarding why another law firm was being added at that board meeting?
No.
Mr. Canning referred at that board meeting to emails he had received by the public with regard to the school attorneys, did he not?
Yes, he did.
And he said that he would produce those for you, did he not?
He did not.
No, did he say that?
Oh, he did say that. Yes.
Did he produce those for you?
He has not.
You filed a Freedom of Information Act request for those emails, is that correct?
That's correct.
What was Mr. Canning's response to the Freedom of Information Act request?
It was denied.
Did he say why he was denying it?
He stated that,
Excuse me, it was,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Kendall
I'm asking,
is the one who made the denial.
Dr. Kendall made the denial?
He had gotten the information from our board attorney, John Murphy.
Dr. Kendall, were you directed to make a denial to the FOIA request?
I received an opinion from our attorney to deny.
Okay. On what basis?
Based on a case in Champaign County that spoke about the sharing of emails. You would have to share the email if those emails were sent to, I believe it was 3 other board members. So this email was not shared with three other board members. the attorney's opinion was that it met the standard to be denied.
And again, Mrs. Jones, did you receive a response to your Freedom of Information Act request?
I did receive a response.
Denied.
Denying.
Okay, it was denied to produce emails that Mr. Candy referred to in open session of the Board of Education, is that right?
That's correct in any form.
What do you intend to do as a result of that denial?
Send it to the PAC officer. Send it to a PAC officer, or it's like the this public access. It's an acronym for public access coordinator, counselor.
And that's a part of the Illinois Attorney General's office.
That's correct. He denied it in the meeting as well as I got a formal letter.
Mrs. Gleason, what was the law firm's name that was hired as well at that board meeting?
I can't remember all of it. Roselands, Copelands, Rosenthal, Murphy. John Murphy is who was hired.
Okay. And you made a comment at the board meeting that Mr. Murphy had represented Ms. Ressler in election challenges at the elections that occurred in 2015, is that right?
That's correct.
And how did you know that Mr. Murphy had represented Member Ressler?
Because I received a letter from him as a challenge.
You filed the objections
I did.
to Ms. Ressler's candidacy?
I did.
Okay. And Mr. Murphy appeared on behalf of Ms. Ressler, is that correct?
I didn't go back to the second hearing, so I don't know that he appeared, but I received letters from his office.
So as far as you're concerned, he was representing Ms. Ressler?
Yes.
Ms. Ressler, did Mr. Murphy represent you with regard to the election challenges?
He did.
And I don't know if I asked this before, Mrs. Jones, was there any conversation with the board prior to that meeting regarding attorneys?
No.
So again, Mr. Cannon brought that to that board meeting on his own, is that correct?
As far as I'm aware of, yes.
Mr. Cannon, do you have anything to respond?
Yes, I do. First of all, I have an attachment to number 4 that I would like to give to each board member. And you can also have a copy.
Can we mark that as exhibit D?
Yes, I would like a copy if possible as far as your exhibits.
At some point in time?
Yeah, that's fine. Does everybody have one?
No.
Another one? As I have stated before, and this is my response to issue number 4. As I have stated before, I believe the arrangement with the previous law firm was unethical due to a conflict of interest between current board member Evelyn Gleason and her son's law firm. I felt this needed to be addressed ASAP. I had arranged for the potential new attorney, John Murphy, to attend the reorganization meeting on April 28th, so he could give his presentation and answer any questions before a vote was taken. Later, to my surprise, I found out that Dr. Kendall instructed Mr. Murphy not to attend this board meeting, as he said it could get ugly. Dr. Kendall's actions this eliminated the opportunity for the board members to have Mr. Murphy answer any questions that the board members had regarding his potential hire. I would like Ms. Campworth to read a statement from our attorney, Mr. Murphy, on this issue for public record.
This is a memo from John Murphy to Larry Canning. I met with Bill Kendall at the Panera Bread, 159th in Harlem, shortly before the first meeting of the new board. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss legal transition issues. Prior to the meeting, Larry Canning had requested that I appear at the meeting to review my firm's credentials. When I asked Bill if I should be in attendance, Bill said it would be better if I not attend the meeting because my attendance might result in disruption and arguments, which he wanted to avoid. I accepted Bill's direction.
Can I speak?
Mrs. Camper, can you please read the top of it just for the record, the from to the subject name?
From John Murphy to Larry Canning, subject per your request, date Wednesday, July 8th, 2:15, 8:43 a.m.
Mr. Canning, you said you arranged for Mr. Murphy to be there, is that right?
I arranged for Mr. Murphy, through conversation, to come and introduce himself and have himself available for the board, the whole board, to ask questions, get familiar with him. He could pass out his pamphlet, all about him. This was denied by Mr. Kendall telling him not to show up. It was arranged for him to be there so these board members could ask questions before they took a vote on whether he was going to be our attorney or not. I feel, again, Dr. Kendall denied their right. It wasn't Larry Canning denying their right. Dr. Kendall denied their right.
And you arranged that on your own as an individual board member.
I asked,
Excuse me.
Okay,
Let me ask the
apologize.
question. You arranged that on your own as an individual board member with regard to Mr. Murphy, is that correct?
yes, without being board president at that time.
But you didn't discuss that with any other board members, is that correct?
I did not discuss that with any other board members at that particular time. I wanted him to come as he was a general citizen and prospective attorney of 228 because he was the one that I was going to recommend to be our attorney at that point in time to clear up this situation.
Dr. Kendall, you said you wanted to respond?
Yes. There was a meeting with Mr. Murphy. At no time did Mr. Murphy express to me that Mr. Canning said he should be at the board meeting. It was kind of just a very simple question. He said, do you think I should be there? And my response to him was, I wish I didn't have to be there because I think it's going to be a Zoom. But I certainly did not direct an attorney not to show up, and certainly I would not direct an attorney not to show up if the board president directed him to show up.
How did the issue get on the agenda, Dr. Kendall?
Mr. Canning told me to put it on the agenda.
And again, Mr. Canning was not board president at the time, is that right?
Correct.
He was just an individual board member at the time.
Yes.
I would like to speak to that. Dr. Kendall, after the election on April 7th, I believe it was, Dr. Kendall immediately called me the next morning and congratulated the group that I was supporting. The group was Parents for Progress. This was very early in the morning. From that day on, so I believe that was the 8th, from that day on, Dr. Kendall continued to call me on issues regarding district business. On many occasions, I instructed Dr. Kendall that when he would ask me my direction on district issues, I said back to Dr. Kendall that I don't feel comfortable with that John Kirkin was our president, but I'll tell you what I would do if I was in your shoes, okay? I made my advice. I didn't understand why Dr. Kendall kept calling me, asking me issues. I was not board president at that time, and I only instructed him by saying, I know what I would do. And that's how it was. And it was on several occasions that Dr. Kendall would call me and ask me direction. I did not understand it. I was a regular board member, not a sitting officer board member. And I always gave him what I would do as far as my opinion. I had no authority as the president. I had no authority because it would be working on your own. But I want that stated for the record.
Dr. Kendall, do you have any response to that?
Yeah. Trying to get my thoughts together. No, I'll speak to it later, but I count 4 to 3.
Did Mr. Candy never make it clear to you that he was going to be board president?
Yes.
And did he say that because he was going to be board president, that had certain consequences?
I don't know if consequences is the right word, but
How would you phrase it?
he was pretty clear that he was going to be the board president.
Was it clear that he expected what he wanted to have done?
He would always, I would agree that he always say, if it was me or I would do that, this is what I would do, yes.
And how did you interpret that?
Again, I count 4 to 3, and if that's what needs to be done, then we're going to do it.
And when you say you count 4 to 3, you mean you count 4 members in the majority?
4 members were the majority, and based on some previous conversations, it seemed pretty clear what I was expected to do.
And those 4 members would include Mr. Candy?
Yes,
And you anticipated he would be board president?
yes,
And told you he would be board president?
yes.
So if Mr. Candy said anything to you, did you believe you had the opportunity to not do what he was asking you to do?
I didn't believe it was in my best interest not to do it.
I would like to respond to that. Was I board president when you asked me what I would do?
No,
I was not board president. I was a single, non-holding office board member at that time.
correct.
And I want it stated for the record, it is very untruthful that Dr. Kendall said that I told him I would be board president. I had no idea that I would be board president. I did not have a crystal ball at that time. I was elected board president by my peers, unknown to me.
Mr. Hauser, can I just state that during the election, Mr. Candy made it very clear to myself that he would be board president when the election was over.
He told you that?
Yes. And other board members.
That is a complete falsehood and lie.
I have one other question about the attorney. If Mr. Murphy wasn't there at Mr. Candy's recommendation that he be there, and none of these questions could be answered, then why did he refuse to table the motion and give the rest of us the opportunity? He said he vetted Mr. Murphy, but he couldn't answer any of the questions that he had.
Would you like me to respond to that?
That's up to you, Mr. Candy.
As I stated before, and I stated this that evening of the reorganization, I felt that action needed to be taken on this ASAP. There was too many things that were so very important. We have hearings, discipline hearings with staff, with teachers, with administrators, that I felt they were not getting a fair shake with the situation at hand. You have a sitting board member with her son representing the school district in these hearings. I don't see how the staff member in question could have a fair shot. I needed to act ASAP, and I acted from cry out from the community.
I want to address the outcry from the community as well as having a fair shake. Because in the reorganization meeting, I did ask the question, at any time did you think that our current attorney, which was Shraga House, has acted unethically at any time? Do you think that they would be, they did not represent us ethically? And at that time, he stated that he did not feel that Shraga House and Ezo has ever represented us unethically.
I stated that?
That's what he stated, you can look at the video.
No, I stated that I believe that they were a good law firm. I just
Yes.
believe the situation at hand needed to be changed. And I'll also revert to saying what I said at that meeting is that I had a conversation with Dr. Kendall stating that if Bill Gleason, Evelyn Gleason's son, was removed from District 228 business, because I gotta believe that there's more business in your law firm that he could have been attending to other than 228 business. I don't know that, I'm just making that as an assumption. If he was removed off of 228 business, this would probably not even be an issue. The week after, I believe it was the week after or 2 weeks after, who was representing 228 in a disciplinary hearing? Bill Gleason. So that fell on deaf ears.
And again, your main request is made as an individual board member, is that right?
Individual board member, correct.
Did
My
the
opinion,
Board of Education ever make that request?
I made it to Dr. Kendall.
Did the Board of Education ever make that request?
Can I finish the statement? I made this statement to Dr. Kendall to have Bill Gleason removed from district business in our one-to-one meetings that are in the summer. We all have one-to-one meetings with Dr. Kendall, and at that meeting, we go over Dr. Kendall's goals, we go over where the district is as a whole. And this is all one-to-one, without board approval. I made that statement that I was very uncomfortable with Bill Gleason, and Bill Gleason is a very good attorney. I have no objections at him as an attorney. What I have an objection is the unethical situation with his mother sitting on the board and him representing a district. Pardon me?
Are you calling us unethical?
I'm calling that situation.
Are you calling us unethical?
I'm calling that situation unethical. I'm definitely not calling you
Are you calling
unethical.
Mr. Gleason unethical?
No,
Okay.
I'm calling the situation unethical.
Did the Board of Education ever request that Mr. Gleason have nothing to do with this?
No, and let me state for the record as well, I understand that this is not against the law. I want to make that very clear. I understand that. But it's very unethical. When you have a situation,
You're calling us unethical again?
I'm calling the situation unethical.
Well, you're calling us unethical by doing that.
So be it. I'm calling it unethical.
So it's on the record you're calling us unethical. Thank you.
It's on the record that that situation is unethical and it had to be dealt with. And as I stated before, I would do it the same exact way. Only with having the new prospective attorney being at that meeting, so the current board members could have asked them questions about his employment and his record as an attorney. I believe they were denied that from Bill Kendall telling him not to show up to that meeting because, quote unquote, it could get ugly.
The present members of the Parents of Progress did have a meeting, I want to say in December or maybe even in November.
About 2014.
Correct. That we were going to elect him president. We first thought that Mrs. Campworth would be the vice president and Mrs. Ressler would be the secretary. Mr. King at this meeting at the Tilly Park Library said no, he would like Mrs. Ressler to be the vice president and Mrs. Campworth to be the secretary.
So in November or December of 2014, Mr. Canning was already aware that he was going to be president.
If we won the election.
And that Ms. Ressler would be vice president. And
If we
Ms.
won the
Campbell would be
election.
secretary. If you won the
If we won the election, and then I was going to go, and my reward was going to be the Hillcrest head coach.
I agree with Mark Johnson, other than the Hillcrest head coach. I agree with Mark Johnson as the discussion as a political action committee and party that, there are discussions. There are transition teams in all forms of government that need to get your, for lack of a better word, your act together before you get in there and you're elected. We knew we were going to win the election. We worked very hard on it. People understood what we were trying to do and our message. We're very proud of that fact. I was not a parent for progress, but I supported them. I went out and I campaigned with them because I believe their message. I'm very proud of that. Absolutely, there was discussions if and when we won, who would be best in what position according to their talents. True.
So it wasn't a surprise to you that you were like a president at the organization?
And it was, I think Mr. Johnson has a date mistake. It was later, it was in November or December, it was more towards the election, as we knew that we would win the election because of our message to the taxpayers of what we wanted to do to move the district forward.
So it's not a surprise to you at the organizational meeting that you were elected president?
It was a surprise to me. I never took it for granted. I took it as an honor during our Parents for Progress meetings that the group would look at me as their leader. So yeah, I was I was pleased with that and honored. Absolutely. Felt very good about that.
Mr. Hauser, can I say something? Mr. Canning did speak to me about what he felt to be an unethical situation with the attorneys. A year ago, I did have a conversation with Mr. Kirkton about that, and Mr. Kirkton was the current board president. He felt very comfortable with the attorneys at the time, so I want the record to say that I absorbed the responsibility of the attorney firm. I did share that with the board president.
All right, the fifth concern raised by Mrs.
Before we move to the fifth concern,
Yes,
may I address two statements that were made?
sure.
And also the record was showed on the video that when we had the reorganization meeting, that I did ask Mr. Canning that have they logged, let me see, is there a conflict of interest? And then he replied, not legal, he doesn't know what the law was in regards to that. Not legally a conflict of interest. The conflict of interest only comes into play if there are considerations for a contract for the position working, and I gave that in the statement that was on the video as well. But as far as the ethical concerns, he did state that he felt that it was an outcry from the community, and that the community felt that was outcry, which has never been substantiated by any evidence of any kind to me. Also, in response to knowing if he was president or not, or knowing how the votes would go in the next meeting prior to the reorganization meeting, I spoke with Mr. Canning briefly about his concerns, and he said that I'm not here to make friends. I have my four, and that's what counts. So as far as his confidence in who he would be in his position, that is the statement that how he felt about having a position. Is that correct?
I'd like to respond to that. Absolutely. I'll speak for myself. I'm not here for friendship with the administration. I'm here for a working relationship with the administration in order to move our district forward. I have no intentions of being best buddies. Now, we have some very nice people here in our administration. 100% agree on that. But there also has to be an understanding that administration does their job, the board does their job, and the faculty does their job. Okay? So we're not here to make friends. And it's my opinion. You can make friends with whoever you want, and I'm not saying that I totally believe the board and administration has to have a very good working relationship in order to make the district work. What I would like to do, and I apologize to you, Ms. Jones, I did not finish my issue response on number 4. I didn't flip the paper, but I'll do that now if you'll allow me that time. Regarding the community outcry during the election, several concerned taxpayers expressed their issue with the potential conflict of interest and perception of lack of ethics with the previous legal team. Mrs. Jones requested emails regarding taxpayer discontent. Mrs. Jones was informed that those emails were sent on my private email account and were not privileged to her. So I'm sorry that I didn't finish that before, but that's the end of my number 4 issue response.
And in my request, it said any and all emails, which I do have a right to according to the school code law. I don't remember the exact number at this time, but the school code law, as well as the public laws that state that I do have a right to. If you promise, something, I believe it should be carried out. And that in that, if it's an outcry for the community, I'm a board member, and all of these are board members, and they should have a right to see the outcry from the community. Otherwise, it's just hearsay to me.
Sure. I totally understand. Without permission from the authors of those emails, I would never present that information without their permission. I do, and I stated in an email to you that I did not have their permission. And I also stated it wasn't just emails. When you're in an election, you're knocking door to door, and you're putting a lot of foot time out there, okay? When that door opens and the conversation starts about change in the district, and I can speak for myself, I heard a lot of discontent about this situation. So you could come back to me and say, I would like the addresses of these houses that told you discontent for the lawyer situation. I cannot do that. I do not have permission to do that from these people.
Do you remember telling me to refer to social media?
Yes.
And for me to look it up myself?
Yes, I did.
Without reference to which social media that you were referring to and which one that you got.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
it is a concern for the community, of the community. And I believe that the Board of Education, if they bring a concern to you, they should also not have a problem presenting it to the rest of the board members, because it's an outcry. If it truly is an outcry. Actually, it was opposite when I went around in the community. It was actually the opposite. I said, does anybody have any problems with the current attorneys? Nobody that I encountered had a problem with the current attorneys. There was nothing unethical or any concerns as far as current attorneys acting unethically in any way.
As a candidate this past year, I was one of those foot people going door to door, talking to people and hearing a lot of the concerns. And I don't think as we were talking to people, I don't think they felt, again, that they acted unethically. They just were concerned about the situation. And there were multiple people that had vocally shared their concerns with us. I will tell you that after the reorganization meeting too, a video was posted on social media, on Facebook of the meeting, and reference to the change in law firms was brought up, and there was a stream of conversations, and shame on me for not taking snapshots of these screens, but I did make an effort to go there to these multiple websites. I think another one is Topics, to make copies of the outcry that I did hear, and to my surprise, everything was taken down. So I saw it myself. I'm just sharing that I did see this information, and that people did speak to me also, just to, again, corroborate some of the feedback that Mr. Kenny was receiving during the campaign.
And Topics, is that a website that people acknowledge, or is that something anybody can, or is there any way tracking system, or is it something like, and forgive me for using this analogy, because this is the only analogy I can think of at this time, something like an inquiry. Oh, okay, you can just write anonymous letters.
Correct. It's like a blog. It appears to be a blog. I don't utilize it. I actually don't reference it often, but it's one that came up a couple of times when I was doing searches, and there was conversations on there also.
And yes, it is true what Mrs. Jones said. I did refer her to social media to satisfy her request of getting this knowledge. And she asked me what sites, and I said, well, Google it, and Google the topic, and they should come up. So she's correct.
And I was also told to Google the topic, and I did, and all I found was several instances of the Hauser Izzo firm and things that they had done, and just glowing report. So I was at a loss to find what Mr. Canning was talking about. He did refer me to Topics, and I saw a couple of comments again, but those are anonymous. I'd also like to state that I've been on board for 22 years. My son, Bill Gleason, was in like 6th grade when I came on board. So You know, I didn't come here with forethought that I'm going to make my son the attorney and run the district, which is what Mr. Canning is trying to accuse me of. He has been with your firm for 10 years, and there's never been any question from anybody, to my knowledge, to any of the previous boards that I've worked with over the 22 years that I've been here. And I resent the implication that it's unethical.
All right, the fifth concern is that Mr. Canning directed new board members not to speak to old board members. Mr. Johnson,
Yes,
is that correct?
yes.
Can you tell us what that conversation you had with Mr. Canning?
Well, during our meetings and during the campaign, he always stressed that we could never trust or the other board member. In fact, I was in one of the committees, and Mrs. Gleason was telling me the number of school district, junior high schools that feed into our district. And Mr. Canning did send me a text and tell me, do not give her the time of day.
Does that make for good relationships with the board of education, the members on the board?
Absolutely not. Like, Ms. Gleason in her efforts, she was sitting right next to me. And I was writing down information and stuff, and I believe that if we're gonna come back and solve the issues that are going on in the district, we have to work together. We don't wanna just say, okay, well, I have 4 votes, and then it doesn't matter what the other people who have far more experience not come back and be a part of it, you know. And yeah, so I continuously talk anyway.
That's a true statement, and I believe after Mr. Johnson leaned over and showed me a text on something, I can't recall what it was, I believe that Mrs. Gleason was trying to trip Mark up in the meeting, okay? And my advice to Mark at that particular time, do not give her the time of day to do that to you.
I'm 51 years old. I do not need somebody to tell me what I might fall into some snare.
I absolutely agree with
at the
that.
situation between us now, I should have been watching you.
And that's
Can
fine.
we have a recess?
Ms. Russell wanted to say one thing.
Go ahead, Ms. Russell.
I do. I just want to say also, as a new board member, that direction was never provided to me not to associate myself or talk to other board members. In fact, on June 8th, I sent an email to the other board members asking for a meet and greet to speak and introduce myself and answer any questions that they have, and I do have emails for that if you'd like them. So I've never been provided that direction, and as a professional and as a board member, I don't think I would, as you said, find that a conducive environment to working with other members of the board. So,
Ms. Rossler, the only reason why you did that is because we had just came back from the conference of the new board member conference and how we should be conducting business.
well, prior to the conference, I was also speaking to other board
Yeah,
members. I
right.
did not turn any board members away. If a board member approached me or welcomed me or congratulated me, I accepted it back. So,
Okay.
yes, as a part of my training that I received, I agreed that it was a correct environment to work in and felt that it was appropriate to have a meet and greet with the other board members. It was something that was, I don't want to say it was, I guess, I don't even know what, I really didn't even connect it to the conference, but if you want to use that as my motive, sure, but it really wasn't.
Okay, that's fine.
Mrs. Jones?
Also in the meeting or between the meetings, it was between the meetings that I was trying to speak with the other members that had just been, it was between the personnel and the finance meeting that when I did try to address the other board members, Mr. Canning literally held his hand out, like he was guarding it, as if you would a child if they were about to be in a car accident and you stopped abruptly. You wanted to stop them abruptly, the hands would always go out and like you don't need to speak or don't say that. He would direct them to me not to do that. Also, he said he felt a personal, I believe that he felt a personal connection with them and personal responsibility for them in saying that, don't talk. And so that's the way I felt about it, although I did want to reach out to the other members. I even requested that we had a formal meeting to learn together in a workshop, and which was denied because he said that he is acting in interest of the other people and that he would be laughed at.
That's not true.
If he would be laughed at, you're denying, you said would they be laughed
Your
at?
last statement is not true.
He would be laughed at if I addressed the other board members. I said, well, I'll address them if you're afraid of being laughed at for having the education in education. So on those two occasions, created a separation. I feel created a separation when I was trying to reach out to other board members and becoming one whole collective board, so that we can work together and go beyond our former relationship of not being board members together. And those two occasions, it was denied that I could speak.
So you had made a request to Mr. Canning and to speak with the entire board and to get the board together.
I had made a request to have a workshop. Also, when we were in the meeting, he would guard them. Like, these are my babies, you can't talk to them.
And your request for a workshop was to Mr. Canning?
Yes, to Mr. Canning. As a president, I said, hey, what do you think about us talking? And he said he doesn't feel that we're ready for a workshop to come together to start fresh.
I just want to ask just clarity, because I don't recall ever having Larry put his hands in front of me like this, but there was one of the first committee meetings where we weren't board members yet, but we were told that we couldn't speak. And so, is that when you're referring to? Because I think after that, I seriously don't remember any of that happening. I remember the board meetings when we were non-board members, and maybe because of the constant direction from the current board members at the time not to speak, maybe that came out when we tried to talk. And as committee member, at a committee meeting, since we weren't board members, we were instructed we couldn't talk at those meetings. And my assumption is that because maybe we just weren't used to the instruction, maybe we were starting to talk, and maybe we were just kind of like reminding us not to talk. But I don't, since we've been board members, I don't recall that happening.
Well, it has been since, and it's been before, and we weren't in a meeting, we were between committee meetings at the time that I'm speaking of. But he, basically did sound like this. And I believe, and if you even look at the last video the first video that we had, he would kind of put his hand out to the side.
And just for the record, you're showing your hands spread apart.
Spread apart like you're guarding your child. Like you would if you were guarding your child.
I promise you, if he was making those hand gestures, I never took it as direction to me to not talk. Maybe people like to use their hands when they talk or get excited, but if he was doing that, I never received that as direction, unverbal direction to not speak at a board meeting or committee meeting or with any other board member.
Mrs. Gleason, did you have something you might add before we break?
I just find it interesting that listing the feeder districts for the school district is ensnaring a board member.
Mrs. Dressler, Mr. Johnson is already...
Excuse me, we're still on 5, and I haven't had the
And I
opportunity to
haven't
discuss, so we can take the break if it's an agreement with
So,
everybody.
Mrs. Dressler.
Mrs. Dressler, can I finish number 5? Mrs. Dressler, President Pro Tem. Can I finish my statement on number 5?
Yes.
Thank you. It's really good that all this love is in the air between the board members right now, and I don't discourage it. But let me tell you this, I've been involved in a few elections. Coming off the election that we just had come off of in April, it wasn't nice, and elections can be tough. When I talked with Mrs. Jones, it was very early off of the election, And again, I believe the election was the 7th, April 7th, and Ms. Jones called me maybe a month later. And I instructed to her that I don't think the board is ready at this time to come together and have a meeting and discuss how we were going to now be friends. And I said that I'm not denying that can't happen in the future. It was too soon. Did I or did I not say it was too soon after the election?
You said, to my recollection, you said that, according to your feelings, your feelings.
According to the election and how I don't want to say brutal because that might be too strong, but again, as I said, elections can not be nice at times. And I felt that at this particular time, I didn't see why we should call something like that. We needed more time to heal, okay, coming off of the election. But I would like to finish. Oh, sure.
Who was the we that needed to heal? Because I know you said that you needed more time.
Mrs. Jones, you had to speak up. Mr.
I know that you said you needed more time.
I felt everybody that was involved in our past April election needed time to heal a little bit before we got together and sat and talked about how we were going to communicate and come together and work for the district. I just felt there was more time needed there.
Well, this is more of a, I didn't try to let you know that this is try to provide literature, which I think was provided through the office. That this is not a kumbaya, touchy-feely-lovey type thing. This is more of a professional development course that would show us how to come together after election, or when a board member, we have one or more board members that are new to the board. It's called one of the courses is called Starting Fresh, and it is it's a workshop to develop you and to start fresh. And that's all I was asking was that I would like for us to be able to come together and refresh, especially with the concern and since the feelings were brought up, I said, let's start fresh, professional, and have a professional development.
I totally understand where you're coming from. Again, there were a lot of issues that went on in the election, and one in particular, when you have a current board member challenge a new prospective board member. Again, these feelings needed time to heal, okay? And at the time you called me, my opinion was we weren't there yet. And it didn't mean that we couldn't get there. I just thought maybe it was too soon, and I conveyed that to you, okay? So I definitely heard you, and I definitely understood what you were trying to convey to me, okay? I would like to read my response to number 5. It's very short and brief. I have always encouraged the new board members to make their own decisions, regardless of my opinions. I told you to be brief.
Well, my statement for the record, Mr. Canning has never directed me who I can and cannot speak to. Mrs. Jones, for your starting fresh comment, I'll have to say you were the only seated board member that congratulated us, that welcomed us to the board, that put your hand out. So to me, starting fresh comes with the current board members extending their hand, welcoming the new board members, and shaking their hands with us, and offering to assist us with getting associated with the school board. That never happened with the current board. You were the only one, Mrs. Jones, that extended your hand and welcomed. You did try to talk to us when we attended trial board meetings. Other than that, Mr. Canning offered to be our mentor, and that's the only welcome we had from the current board.
I take exception to that because I did welcome everyone at the committee meeting that you all had.
The night we were inducted, we were not welcomed by the current
Was
board.
that?
No, I believe I said told everyone congratulations as well too.
I personally was not welcomed by you, so
I mean, I said Mrs. Campbell, I said congratulations as you were all sworn in.
I don't recall that.
That's unfortunate.
Mrs. Bressler, there was a request for a break. I know Mr. Johnson took a break, but other people might like a break. It's up to you.
Absolutely.
How long do you want to take?
10 minutes, sounds good.
So so it's 9:02 right now, almost, so come back before 9 o'clock.